Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. Seems like forever since we've been on here and talking to you guys, so I sure appreciate everybody uh, being patient with us between some of the technical difficulties that we had and stuff. Uh, anyway, we're here tonight. Thank heavens. Everything's working so far. How's Chad tonight?
Yeah, we're doing good. We're fresh off a week's vacation and back to work today, ready to rock and roll. So we're started working on the trophies today for the Harris Clash. So pretty excited about that. So pretty busy day here, putting fires out from being gone for a week, but plugging away.
Yeah, 14 days to the Harris Clash. Won't be long. We're hopefully waiting on a preview of the t-shirts and been just doing all that little tiddly stuff, getting the things all ready to go for the Clash. So that's been good. That's kept me pretty busy. Shop's been real busy. We sold another car today, and everything's been going as busy as we can keep up with it right now. So I can't complain. Everything's been going well. Did a little racing over the weekend. Went to Marshalltown. They had a special at Marshalltown and Boone for stock cars. King of the Catwalk, I think, is what it was called. Paid 2,000, 2,000 to win. Jake McBurney and his new B&B by BHE won Friday night, and he finished third on Saturday night. Damon Murdy won Saturday night, and then he's modified. He finished third on Friday night, and he won on Saturday night in the modified. So Jake had a pretty good weekend, and it was races were good. I mean, it was both nights were real good. Jeremiah, I actually do not know. I forgot to ask Amy about that today, how many pre-entries we have. I honestly can't actually tell you that question. And I don't know actually how to look it up. So I couldn't actually tell you. It's all an internet deal through my race pass, and technology is not necessarily my strongest suit. Henry and Christy, tell Bobby thanks. Thank you on the shocks. He has us running. We finished second out of 33 cars this weekend. Good. Glad you had a good weekend. That sounds pretty good. 32nd out of 33 is a pretty good number. Brandon, on a USRAB mod, what bar angle on the left do you recommend at drop? How much left rear chain drop is a good starting point? Left rear drop usually is somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.5 inches is a pretty good starting spot. We run our left rear at drop when it's up against the chain. I kind of set my drop so that my left rear bar is at 45 degrees of angle. And so I adjust the bar accordingly. At static, we're at about 28 degrees, and dynamic, we're at about 45 degrees. And that seems to work pretty good. Taylor Cool, her car, she started way back, quite a ways back, in Boone the other night, and she ended up fourth. It's a pretty unique night in the sport mods. Young lady got her first win, and another young lady got her first second, and then Taylor got fourth. So there was 3 girls in the top 4. So that was pretty cool. Matthew, how can you increase traction or bring it in quicker with a lift arm setup? And what effect does changing the diameter of the biscuits on the pull bar have on traction? For example, going from 3 or 2 yellow and 1 red, 1 black with 1 red black to 2 orange. I'll have to let you. I'm not that knowledgeable on those biscuits.
Well,
Colors.
on the lift arm, I don't know if we're comparing a lift arm car or if you have a lift arm car and a pull bar car, but the lift arm, when you move the fifth coil closer to the rear end, it gives you the traction sooner, and farther away from the rear end gives you longevity traction down the straightaway. As far as those pucks, I'm assuming you're referring to quick car stuff, and I don't know anything about their rates and what they got going on there, so I'd have to. I'm not really sure what that all is there. I'm only familiar with our stuff.
Yeah, the black, of course, is the stiffest, and then red, and then I think they have a blue in that mix, but the 2 yellows and 1 red, 1 black with the break to 2 oranges, and yeah, Matthew, I'm not going to be able to help you much on that either, because it's been so long since I've actually messed with one of those pull bars that I would be stabbing at things and maybe give you the wrong information.
I'd say the best thing to do would be to find somebody that has an ultra force machine near you, and you can put it in there and have them preloaded to how you're racing it, and then travel it. I don't know if you have a travel indicator on the pull bar, but see what kind of travel you're getting on the racetrack, and then put it in the machine and see what the rate is. We're looking for, I don't know, IMCA car. I guess I don't know if you're IMCA or open or what you are, but most of the time we're looking for 22 to 2,400 pounds at 1.25 inches of travel. So I would dial in whatever you got for bushings there to be close to that, and it should perform well.
Yeah, Henry says my pull bar on my sport mod is only moving 1/2 inch. Is that correct? It's your new line one. Actually, it should probably move in the neighborhood of an inch. Henry, I'd probably call Bobby about that tomorrow and talk to him about that. But with a sport mod, maybe we're not getting as much movement as we do with the modified. So,
wait a second, what did I miss? You can run a pull bar on sport mods now?
Well, this must not be an IMCA type sport mod if he's got a pull bar.
Open, probably a UMP sport mod.
It's something other than that, because no, you can't run a pull bar on. They have enough trouble with stock car bodies, let alone if something like that, they'd have a cow. Oh yeah, Ohio. There we go. That makes sense.
Opens.
Wes, curious on both of your opinions on positive and negative on soft springs on the right front. Well,
I'm not a fan.
I'm not a huge fan of soft springs on the front, because what happens is, of course, the amount of abuse that we put that right front spring in, if we go softer on that spring, the spring's not going to last, and I don't really care. I'll argue with the spring companies all day long. I don't care. The spring's going to go away. It's just a fact. If you get too soft, what happens is it just rolls over and then lays over on the right rear, and then you kind of got a right rear tight situation. So I'm not a huge fan. Right now, what we run on our stuff is 500 pounds. I know there's some guys out there that are running some 450s and stuff like that, but in my opinion, I'm not a big fan on real soft springs because, like I said, I think they're inconsistent. Matthew, I have a USRA GRT currently on a lift arm, but considering putting the pull bar on it, the pull bar I have is a quick car with the 2 yellows and 1 red and 1 black, like the older BHE sheet says. Was that, and was just curious as to what happens when you stiffen or soften those biscuits. Well, when you stiffen it, you're going to take travel away from it, which sometimes that's not a bad thing. I would guess, I would make sure I have an indicator on that. And in my opinion, anything that's over 1.25 inches of movement is wasted movement. If you don't have traction in that first 1.25 inches, I think you're too soft and you're giving up traction. Brandon, are the drop cups being used on the right rear of USRA B mods or mostly used on stock cars? We're actually using them on B mods and stock cars. We've got one car that the way the springs set in on that right rear, I thought that maybe the drop cup was causing a little bit of a problem with it, so we put a regular cup on there, and it's still the spring still winds goofy. So we've got it's the way it's mounted, the way we've got it mounted in the cars is not right. It's not the cup's fault. If I could run if I could run the drop cup, I would definitely run a drop cup, because then you can run that bearing and then that spring, would have a little bit of freedom, because that right rear spring bends all over the place. Sport Mod, if you are going to take steer out of the car, to do so, you likely lengthen the left side and shorten the right side. How much do you adjust at a time? If you are going to take steer out of a car, do you lengthen the left side? No, because you're actually, by lengthening the left side, you're actually, yeah, you're right. You would be taking steer out of that, because what you're doing is your dynamic steer. Like as an example, your dynamic steer goes, if you're in there square, will probably go 3 inches. That left rear will move ahead 3 inches. So then if you put like 3 turns in there, that's 3/8 of an inch. So then all of a sudden, now your left rear is only going to move ahead 2 5/8 inches. So that's where you're taking the steer out of it. So you're correct in what you said. And adjustment wise, I'm not a big fan of going over 3/8 of an inch. I know there's some guys out there that go more than that, but I definitely wouldn't go over 1/2 inch. That's quite a bit. Larry, advantages of running more negative camber on an IMCA modified. Well, the big thing is depending on the air pressure that you run, a lot of times the negative camber just gets it so that tire rolls into the racetrack instead of rolling over the tire onto the rim. So that's the biggest advantage of running more negative camber is getting more load equally put on that tire. And then of course it has less as you're going down the straightaway. Some people believe that you've got less tire on the surface, so there's speed there. I don't know if I buy that, but I guess it sounds like a good theory. Kevin, what effect would a longer J-bar have? Example, running a 21-inch bar with a center climber mount, or a 23-inch bar mounted to the left side of the chassis. What's your opinion on that, Chad?
That's going to move the roll center to the left in the car, which is going to make it, well, some people say it makes it turn in, but I think it makes it tight. When you get the rear roll center to the left behind the front roll center, when you go to initially drive into the corner, in my opinion, them roll centers have to be lined up. And if they're not lined up, it's going to take more motion to get that rear roll center to transition into the corner. So that's going to give the car more traction and be tighter on entry. And the overall longer bar is going to be more traction altogether.
And you're going to notice a slower response. The longer bar is just going to, like for a big fast racetrack, the longer bar might be good. Short racetrack, short tight one, I would stay with the 21-inch bar.
Yeah.
Some guys run a 19-inch bar.
Yeah, you got a 23 and you go to a quarter mile, you're going to regret that.
Yeah.
You're going to have to put the shorter one on to get to rotate there.
Yep. No doubt.
You missed a couple there. You had
It,
Craig and Jeff gearing for Deer Creek 602 crate.
Well, gearing for Deer Creek 602 crate. I actually don't know that on the top of my head, but if you go to our website uh, and you log on to the Harris Clash website, I know there's some facts, or I don't know what it's actually called, but there's something that has facts about the racetrack and stuff like that, and I know that's on there. So definitely take a look at the website. I'm pretty sure it's on there. And if not, message me tomorrow and I will find that out for sure, because I can call some people. Jeffrey wants to know if the new product is ready to show.
I had it 2 weeks ago, and then we had a difficulty. But yes, it is 503 dirt shield. So every pinion mount now that goes out will have this new spacer with it. So this is what Brandon Davis, and we've had a few people, like over the years, you complain about the J-bar getting packed full of mud. It's just so vulnerable down there in the bottom, gets just packed full early in the night when it's heavy. And this is one of them things where the guys came to me and complained a few times, and then when Brandon said, why don't you just make a spacer or something to cover the head of the bolt to shield it, it was just kind of like a light bulb, like, oh my God, why didn't we do this like 15 years ago, right? Something so easy to change the bolt kit and make a shield to keep that dirt from packing in there. It's just going to help the comm bearings last, and then the longevity of the bars and your whole maintenance program, and not have to get underneath there and use a screwdriver and pick that hard pack stuff out early in the night. And just the overall huge improvement to the products moving forward. We did a really cool video, which unfortunately Facebook, love them or hate them, shut down the post on that, and it didn't get a whole lot of traction. But if you go to the Wehrs Machine YouTube, there's a full video on the creation of this from Brandon giving us the idea. We sit down, talk about it, design it, go through the whole start to finish process, going to Deer Creek, testing it. He won with it that night. The weekend we were there with the first time. So, not like I said, not going to get you 2 tenths, but it's going to increase the longevity of that Panhard bar and help that comm bearing live. So we're excited to be the first in the industry with that, and because we are the innovators here. So guys like Brandon and all these race car drivers all over. I was at Huset's Speedway on the way home from vacation, and another driver's like, hey, you should do this, and I was like, damn, that's a really cool idea. So it doesn't matter what track we're at. You guys are full of such good ideas, and we really appreciate you bringing them to us and being the leaders and innovating, and we take care of you guys when you do that. So 503 is ready to go. When you order a pinion mount new, it'll come with us. If you want to convert your pinion mount, if you order the 503, you'll get the bolt, the spacer, and a new nut. The bolt that you have in your current stuff is too short, so you'll need the one that'll come with the new one to convert. So pretty cool little piece. Like I said, not 2 tenths, but I guess if your Panhard bar lives and doesn't bind up, maybe it is 2 tenths.
Sure, you bet. Yeah, anytime you can take some, withstand some sort of bind. I mean, of course, having a Panhard bar bind up would be trouble.
Yeah.
Okay. Jason said that they ran a 567 at Deer Creek last year. That's actually sounds about right, because everybody tells me that this is very similar. Deer Creek is very similar to Boone. The way you race Boone and you race Deer Creek are very similar. So, and that's the gear you would run at Boone. So that makes a lot of sense. Trevor, without changing any perch heights on the spring slider, does the spring table move by just flipping the slider to the spring top versus bottom? No. It's all about the mounting points, where it's mounted on the car versus mounted on the rear end. So you can put the spring at the top, you can put the spring at the bottom. The car really doesn't care where the spring actually is. Dustin, 2-link with a left rear slider, 80 pounds of load with a 250-pound right rear car is stuck on the right rear. Great drive, just needs to tame down J-bar and pull bar, not a lot of angle. That we're actually seeing, and I don't know whether it's our winter was that much different or the racetracks are different or what's different, but a lot of guys that were running 250-pound springs are getting to the point where they're getting too much side bite, and we've had to calm them down and go down to like a 225 to get the car to actually roll more and not put quite so much load on the tire itself. So you might try a softer spring, or just changing some of your left side percentages around or something like that. But I know, like I said, we've run into that a couple times with some drivers that we work with that were running 250s, and we found more performance going to a softer spring like a 225. Seth says, "Hey Bob, how you doing, Seth? Glad to see you're on here. Just wanted to give your crew a shout out. Very great customer service. Every question answered when I call. Everything shipped the same day when I order. Get stuff and great work. And we do a lot of business together, and I appreciate that." Well, I appreciate that, Seth. It's always nice to hear that. I have a tendency to hear the other sides of the conversation, the stuff that didn't go so right. So it's always nice to hear the stuff that went right, and so that's always good. Chad and I were talking before the show about the UPS strike, so we're hoping that they get that deal resolved, because that's going to be a mess. And the thing of it is, the people that have FedEx accounts, FedEx is going to get overloaded if it does. It's going to be a mess, a really big mess. But hopefully they'll get it solved. If the left front is carrying, what's the best adjustment to get it back down on the ground? Well, believe it or not, you're either too soft on your right rear, so you either got too soft of a spring or whatever. Most generally, the rear end is too far to the left. What I always recommend doing is I line up my left side tires in line, and I make sure that my right rear tire is not over an inch inside the right front. So if you can run wheel spacers, I would just, to try it some night, I would stick a 1/2-inch wheel spacer on that right rear, and I think you'll find that will help you quite a bit, because that's the most common thing when I see somebody toting the left front. Either they got a super, super soft right rear spring in there that's not holding the car up, or they've got their right rear trailing arm pointed downhill, so it's not letting the car do any, the trailing arm's not resisting any of the motion. Those type of things would be what I would look at. Jacob, pros and cons for running maximum length or minimum length trailing arms on a sport mod. Wouldn't be changing wheelbase, just bar lengths, 1/4 mile, small 1/3 mile. Well, it depends on what your rules are. If you're actually running on an IMCA sport mod, you can't be, I think you can't be longer than 18, and you can't be shorter than 16. What we do on our BHE cars, I run a longer one on the left rear so that I can run more angle and make it not as violent with the angle. And then I run a shorter one. So I run a 17 on the left rear and a 16 on the right rear. A lot of guys that want more instant traction run the pair of 16s. And now I know in the Wissota world, which is kind of a different deal. They can't run the angles like that we can. So a lot of times those guys will run a longer right rear bar so that it doesn't steer as much with the angle in it, and that seems to work really well for the Wissota type setup. Wes, can you explain spring table on a stock car? Why does it matter the length of the drop cup and not where it's mounted to the frame? Chad's getting these diagrams out here.
I keep these here. They're handy.
Yes.
So on a screw jack style car, it's the tip of the screw jack. So wherever the tip of the screw jack is, so the cup is in the equation and the spring is in the equation, and it's measured from the ground. So when the right side is lower than the left side, it tips over easier. So if you think of the spring table kind of like a teeter-totter, if the right side's lower, it's going to fall. If the right side's higher, it's going to have to go up over the top of that to get the motion. So level is neutral, we call it. With the right side lower is a positive, and a negative is with the left side low, so it has to go over the top. So, and the reason being is, this is a solid, the screw jack cars are a solid member, so it's fixed here in the chassis, and then that goes down, and the tip of that is basically the roll couple point. Where on a coilover, wherever that heim is on the chassis is the point, because that's where it's affixed to the chassis. But seeing this solid and the heim moves, that's the difference. So basically the motion is on the tip of the screw jack there. So that's why on a screw jack style car or in the front, the spring height and the screw jack location is the spring table determining.
Trevor, an IMCA modified, solid J-bar or bushing J-bar? I always run a solid one. We used to experiment back when we were building late model cars with those bushing bars, and the problem was, you either had you always had a variable in the equation, and I'm not a fan of having many variables, so I don't run one just because I think it allows for some movement, and with our tire that we have, I don't think we want that kind of movement. We want everything to be relatively rigid so that the tire itself doesn't try to roll under or get moved around or whatever the case would be. Trevor, one more might be dumb. Since we have to have the left rear chain solid mounted, can we put bushings in the slider and have the limit drop just against the chain limits? Well,
And I don't know what sanction you run.
yeah, if it's IMCA, they would frown on that.
Yeah, you can't put anything inside the slider. Technically, that's illegal just about everywhere, I think.
Yeah.
But one thing about a solid chain, I don't know where you're located, but I mean, if you have it like IMCA, you're solid. So that's where, 5-6 years ago, we thought we wanted to be out by the cage, just because it had better control of that tire and the motion. And essentially what it was doing was picking the tire up too easily. So slide that clamp on the axle in close to the bell. So then back to the teeter-totter, which I reference the teeter-totter all the time. But if your chain's hooked up close to the wheel, it's going to have a greater effect. If you move it in there, then it's going to have less of an effect on that tire. So, and actually you get a lot of traction by moving that thing from that cage inboard to the bell. You won't believe the amount of traction you'll get, because when the right rear goes up in the wheel well and it articulates over that chain, it really makes that left rear dig.
Yeah, definitely does. Night and day difference in performance. Ours is mounted all the way up against the bell, and then we actually put a different mount, an extra bar in the car so we can move that chain more inboard. It just makes that right or that left rear be more free movement. definitely is a big help. Trevor said he sent you some drawings before.
I get wild drawings from a lot of people.
Yeah.
It was funny.
Right.
We were on a quick story. We were on vacation, and I reference the Etch a Sketch all the time. When people say that they got an idea or whatever, I once in a while I say I fire up the Etch a Sketch, and my kids have caught on to this. So we're on vacation and we're in this store, and my youngest goes, "Dad, look, an Etch a Sketch." I said, "Hey, we should buy it, and then we can design product on there."
Yeah, there you go. Dustin, right rear spring on top of the rear end, free hanging, looks like up and down, but the right height on the ground, it's got a curve in it. Would that affect layover on the right rear? Well, believe it or not, we actually make them so they have a slight curve in there, because when you get the left rear all hiked up against the chain and that spring starts to move, that it actually straightens the spring up more. If you have it perfectly in line, like technically the rules want you to have it, it'll be all wadded up when the car's in actual dynamic motion and look weird as all could be. And it still does, but we try to fudge and get as much out of it as we can. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. What I tell you to do is, once again, I'd take my right front spring out of the car and set it at like what your shock travel would be, usually about 4 inches of shock travel, and then jack up underneath the seat until your left rear bar is at about 45 degrees angle, and see what that spring does. You'd be amazed. I mean, we've done some videos, in-car videos of that, and how that left rear works or the right rear works. I have no idea, but it definitely gets a lot of abuse. And that's where, once again, I realize that the spring companies have these guarantees on these springs and stuff, but that's kind of in a normal operation. Well, in racing, we don't really put those springs through a normal operation. They're bent and bound and all twisted up, and a new set of springs, make a big difference in the car from time to time. So that's why, even though they're, it's not really as expensive as buying a new tire, but the life expectancy of the spring for the abuse that we put it through, you just can't expect it. And most all will run at $65 springs. So to make that spring at a price point where it's affordable, it's made to be square, and our stuff just doesn't do that. UMP modified pull bar or lift bar, which works best? Well, now if I'm understanding, UMP doesn't have a very big spoiler. Yeah, I didn't think so. So that being said, I probably would lean towards if I was on a big high bank half mile, that lift bar would be ideal. But on anything that's short, where you're stopping and going and really need more traction up off the corner, the pull bar is going to give you more traction. Just the way they work is going to give you more traction up off the corner.
I don't know if I know a UMP mod with a lift arm on it.
I would think without the spoiler, I'd think that'd be tough. USRE B mod, Chevelle stub, 600-pound left front, 550 right front, 100-pound left rear on a slider in front of the housing, 225-pound right rear on a slider. Car gets in good, rotates good, but digs the frame horn in the dirt bad. Tried changing my entry in the corner and it still buries it. Do I want to mess with ride heights? So any tips on getting it out of the dirt? Well, that's a tough one.
I'd go to anti-dive first.
Yeah, I would probably work on changing some anti-dive in the front end so that when you get in there under the braking, that it doesn't slam down so much. That would be my go-to for sure. And if you got to change ride heights, and I'm not sure what the racetrack is that you're running, but it sounds like it's super fast. You definitely that can be a problem, but it depends on what.
The problem with raising the ride heights is you mess with the roll center so much, and then when you change the roll center, if you're raising it to get it off the racetrack, you're changing the roll center, so the car's not going to turn because you're raising the roll center up. So that's why I'd rather do something else, either increase the spring rate or change the anti-dive, pro dive, something that doesn't change that. It seems like everybody that messes with the ride height messes with the initial entry bad.
It's a give and take deal on that. I mean, it's definitely, it might solve one part of the problem. 3/8 high bank. Yeah, you're hitting it pretty hard, no doubt. Yeah, I would play with my anti-dive on my upper A-frames and see about adjusting that out, and that's a big advantage too. The other thing is maybe try taking a little bit of angle out of your pull bar, running it a little bit less. Like if you're running a short pull bar at 20 degrees, that's definitely going to slam it in the ground a lot harder than if you're running a 30-inch pull bar at 15 degrees. So you might want to look at how the pull bar is located, possibly move the pull bar a little to the right. That might help it a little bit. Austin, IMCA Northern Sport Mod. It's tight in the center on the gas. Remove left rear bite or reduce loose roll steer. Well, if you're tight on the gas, I would probably increase my roll steer so that I had more roll steer to turn the car, or increase tire stagger. That would be more of my, left rear bite. You could take some left rear bite out of it, but what that's going to do, even though it says that it's on the gas, a lot of times the car's still on the right rear hard, and the power band that we have doesn't necessarily lift the car up and get the car turned right away. So that's kind of where stagger and more roll steer would definitely help that, and that would work very well.
Possibly just the timing of the steer too, like increase the angle on the right trailing arm. Don't put any more in, change the angle of the arm, so as the car is transitioning through its wheelbase and back, as you're transitioning through the middle of the corner and picking up the gas, then it's roll steering loose more with the angle. And you don't,
and that will work, and that will work really well too. So definitely something to think about there. You bet. Right on the frame or on the rear end for the pull bar to move. I would actually move them both. I'd move the whole pull bar to the right if you have that option.
B-mod, they got to be centered, don't they? Or whatever your rule is there. But
well, let's see. Yeah, that is. You still. Yeah, I forgot about that. An IMCA sport mod, you don't dare do moving that. So don't go moving that. Not a good idea.
But he's talking about angle, so probably up on the frame, right?
Up on the frame. Yep, definitely up on the frame. If you move the chain inward on the left rear. Do I need to take bite out of the car off the left rear tire? Sorry, so many questions. Well, don't worry about the questions. That's fine, Henry. No problem. You can ask as many questions as you want. That's what we're here for. In answer to your question, I wouldn't change bite. I just moved that thing in. I wouldn't change my setup on anything.
No, it's the one thing it might do is it might index a little bit more, but I would just try it. If you feel like it's too tight, then you could adjust the wedge, but it's I don't think it's worth trying it or worth changing it before you feel that. What I'm saying is you got to move the chain and feel that, and then if it's too much, adjust. But don't compensate before you make a change, then you don't know what the change did. Don't overthink the change.
Adam says 1 inch off center. Yeah, that's the rule. It's got to be 1 inch off center is what the rule is for a USRA B mod. The other thing too, sometimes a lot of panhard bar angle can actually make the car dive on the front end too. Because what it'll do is it'll actually go to land on the right rear, and then the front end drops down with it. So I've experienced that in the past where guys that run a lot of panhard bar angle because they like that right rear stuck definitely slams the front end into the ground. And whatever the right front does, the right rear does, and vice versa. I mean, they both kind of work together all the time. So
I think you missed Dustin.
Good luck, Adam. We hope that helps you. Stefan, if you're loose center off on the bottom groove of a slick racetrack, what's the best way to tighten up a hobby stock car without really sacrificing entry? We are not allowed to drop or lower our trailing arms. Biggest thing with those cars, it's kind of old school stuff, but moving weight around. Maybe you might have to move a little bit more weight to the left side with that narrow. You're probably running a fairly narrow tire, so side bite usually is not a big deal. I'd probably increase my left rear weight, and if you can do it on the scales, on a set of scales, you'd be better off. But if you don't have a set of scales, I would probably just relocate a chunk of weight from the right side to the left side, and that will help. And moving the weight back can help too. AJ,
you missed Dustin.
What? I missed Dustin.
Yeah, when we were shuffling questions there, you missed the Dustin there.
Dustin, currently have a right rear spring on top of the rear end, but our rules say can't run a coilover on the right rear. But I'm curious of running a slider in front and the shock mounted behind the housing. Right rear, your thoughts? That definitely works. The shock behind the housing, probably is not going to take a major difference, but I know we played with that a little bit. We found that, we had to change the valving a little bit for that shock, but I would definitely try it. It's definitely going to give you more traction. When you run it like that with the coilover, with the spring on the slider and the shock behind the housing, it's definitely going to give you more traction.
Somebody's yanking on the doors here trying to get in.
Well, heck, you might as well answer that. We might have a special guest.
Dude, it's 7:45 at night. The place is closed. What are we doing here? I don't know who it is.
Yeah, that's probably what they're thinking too. Somebody's in there.
Trying to figure out where my pistol is.
AJ, assuming my motor is not tired, how can I get more straightaway speed? My corners are great, Speed is good in and out of the corner, but I'm getting killed down the straightaway. IMCA Sport Mod. Well, it depends on what gear you're running. We'll just say an example. You're running a 567. If you ran a 555, you're going to have more straightaway speed. Now, you're going to have the motor to pull it, but that's going to give you more straightaway speed. Other than, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Straightaway speed has a lot to do with engine. And so
Rotating weight.
yeah, rotating weights definitely, something like that makes the car get up and go quicker. Those kind of things. But yeah, I would talk to my engine guy about, if there's anything that he can think of header wise or anything that might help. I'm not real sure what to tell you. Gears are also in the ballpark of what everyone else is running. Well, if that's the case, that would lead me to take a look at the motor. Maybe it's ready for valve springs or something like that. Might be an idea. Greg, IMCA Sport Mod. For more forward bite, left rear is already all the way up on the frame. Right rear is in the middle hole on the frame. Well, you can drop that right rear a little bit more. What I would actually do is I would contemplate leaving my right rear in the middle hole on the frame, but I would raise it on the rear end. If you're like in the 4.5-inch hole, which is normally where everybody is, move it up to a 4-inch hole. You'll find that definitely gives you more traction when you raise it on the rear end. That seems to give the car more traction all the way through the corner and off the corner. That's an adjustment I do quite a bit. Henry, what's my opinion on grooving tires? Now, did we say that Henry was an IMCA guy?
I don't remember.
Well, my opinion on an IMCA tire, my feature tires, no. Okay. In my opinion, my feature tires, I would probably not groove a whole lot. I'd probably sipe them. I still believe in the fact that the more tread we have on the surface of the racetrack when it's a dry slick, the better off we are. With sipes to open them. Oh, yeah. Okay. The M30s and M60s. But grooving will give you knife edges, which will help with traction. Now, my heat race type tires, they're grooved up a little bit more because, of course, I need more traction when it's muddy or greasy and stuff like that. So I don't put a lot of grooves. Like I said, what I actually run is my new tire I'll run for the feature. I will lightly groove it, but sipe it the best. And then the next night or the next couple nights or later on, I'll change those tires to be my heat race tires, and I'll put more grooves in them, which gives them a little bit more life and helps you get a little bit more time out of your tire. In your opinion, what angle do you recommend the pull bar on an IMCA Sport Mod? I like 15 degrees. I don't run a lot of angle because most of those cars are short on horsepower to a point, and you've got a big enough spoiler back there that I think the car is going to drive better overall with a 15-degree angle. Jeremiah, you can go too far with the left rear bar angle. I've found more traction moving mine a couple holes from the top because the car reacts. Measure it and dynamic and don't go over the 45 degrees. Yeah, that's kind of what I said before too. Is 45 degrees is kind of the magic point that I wouldn't go over the 45 degrees. Just because you got a couple more holes doesn't mean you need to use them. We use, like I said, a lot of times 2 holes down from the top is where I go, and then I adjust my chain to get that 45-degree angle dynamic. Good point, Jeremiah. Well, we got a few minutes here for a couple more questions. Once again, August 8th, 32nd Annual Harris Clash. And if you can't attend, you can always watch it on IMCA TV, but definitely a race to see. And hopefully all you racers want to come and race with us because it's a pretty nice racetrack. And the Queensland's do an awfully great job. I should say awfully, an awesome great job making sure that racetrack is the best thing that we can have to race on. They do an excellent job. And it's always a great show. Okay, Dustin, thank you guys. Great info. New car and built this thing up. New 2,600-pound stock car, USRA rear suspension rules. I got a solid pull bar, 80 pounds of load in the slider, 250 pounds right rear spring. Car just lays over on the right rear hard. I got phenomenal traction and drive. I just need to get the right rear out of the racetrack a little. 55% rear, 52% left. I can afford to take lead off if I need to. Maybe move forward. Left chain is all the way out. I would probably tighten my left rear chain up a little bit, and I would take some of that weight that's on the back of the car and put a section up there on the door bar right there by your left front foot and kind of try to get that left front working a little bit more. Same thing as we told a customer earlier, try a wheel spacer on the right rear, a 1/2-inch wheel spacer on the right rear. That might help calm that down. Definitely, those are some things I would try. Northern Sport Mod, again, can you get the same tight feeling with, say, 4 inches of roll steer at drop? Thinking the feeling is that the left rear is coming so far forward, it's causing the car to be too tight in that way. Well, I wouldn't think it would be too tight, but it's, that's a lot. That's kind of, you're also bringing it quite a ways forward to the point where it's going to gain a lot of load on the left rear tire. And so that could definitely help. That could give you the feeling that you're thinking. That's quite a bit. I never go over 3 inches of steer.
Oversteer is definitely tight because if you point the rear end towards the fence and you initially pick up the fuel and it's pointed towards the wall, the initial reaction to that rear end then is to drive you to the wall. So if you get too much, you'll have that instant tight feeling, and then your instant response is fuel. So you're going to think you're too loose, but you're actually too tight. That's why when you talk about your steer number, you don't ever change it. Like if your steer number is 3, if your chassis builder says it's 3, you make it 3. Don't go to 3.5. Don't go to 4. You stay at 3. If you make an adjustment and you go too far, you're going to have, in my opinion, when that thing's pointed to the wall and you touch the fuel, it's going to drive the car to the right. And Jimmy Mars agrees. That's what he always talks about, having too much steer. And when you pick up the fuel, it's pointed to the wall. So I agree that could be instantly tight. And then you think you're loose because you hit the fuel because you're instantly tight.
Jake wants to know what's your go-to adjustments when the track slows down and slicks off? I usually take a little bit of angle out of my right side bar. I'll probably put a little less steer in it. Like if my number is 3 inches of steer, I might go down to 2 3/4 inches of steer, so that it's a little bit less. That's the majority of the time that that's the two adjustments that I adjust most of the time. I'll set my shock drop. I'll raise my shock drop up so that the left front can't raise. The shock drop is like only an inch instead of an inch and a half, so that when the car comes up and gets under throttle, it tries to load the left rear a little bit better. Those are probably my big adjustments. What's a good adjustment for a heavy track where the car is good everywhere, but doesn't rotate on entry like I want it to? It's good once the racetrack starts to get slick and good under throttle, but having trouble getting it to rotate on entry. Even with aggressive pads and the brake adjuster all the way to the rear. I would. Damn cat's having a canary.
Nothing on it?
It never ends around here. Either it's the dog or the cat, or it's just never quiet. Now the dog's coming into the picture to figure out what the heck's going on with the cat. Anyway, back to your story, Jeremiah. I would try a softer left front spring. Softer left front spring is only going to affect the car on corner entry. It's not going to change under throttle. It's not going to change anything how it rotates or anything like that. It's just going to help the car turn better getting in, because when it gets into the corner, it's going to fall on that left front and take a little bit of load off that right rear and allow the car to turn in better. And that's one of the biggest things that we mess with a lot too, is that left front spring. We changed that quite a bit. A real dry, slick racetrack, we'll up the spring rate. We maybe go to a 550. On a real heavy racetrack, we might run a 450. It just all depends on corner entry, because I don't want to change the geometry because everything else is working good. I'm just having a little bit of trouble with the right rear being stuck too hard. Well, if I go change Panhard bar, if I go change other bar angles, I'm changing the car in other spots too, where that left front spring just affects corner entry. Let's see. How often you guys do this? Able to go back and listen again and take notes? Yeah, this thing is on. It'll be on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and you can listen to all 85 episodes or how many ever we've got on there. You're welcome to listen to them, and we try to go every other week. Now, we are going to go again next week. We've got a special guest. Cole Queensland, who's the actual promoter of the Deer Creek Speedway, co-owner of the Deer Creek Speedway. He's going to be our guest, talking a little bit about Harris Clash. So next week we're going to spend a little time talking about that. And we'll still do our technical stuff, the same thing, but since we missed all those weeks, we felt that we'd give you 2 weeks in a row so that we still had a couple of weeks here in July rather than not hardly only one in July or 2 in July. So don't forget to log on next week. It's the same format. Everything will be the same. Like I said, we'll have a special guest, Cole Queensland, promoter and co-owner of the Deer Creek Speedway, will be on here with us. Melissa, what are your thoughts on taking bite out of a stock car as the track slicks off? Most I know add bite. Well, the advantage to taking bite out of the car is it's going to give you more side bite. When you take bite out of the left rear, you take load out of the left rear, it puts load on the right rear, which is going to give you more side bite. some guys like that driving feel, and they like that right rear stuck a little harder, which we'll do. Now, if you're a guy that kind of wants to roll in and roll the middle and drag race off the corner, I wouldn't take bite out of it, because you're going to want all the bite you can get to get it up off the corner. But if the car's a little free getting in, and the driver kind of thinks it's maybe a little too free in the middle, taking some bite out of the car definitely will do that. And once again, stock cars, man, you can change that car like no other by moving a 20-pound weight from the right side to the left side. It's unreal. But anyway, Greg, IMCA Sport Mod, what is the do left rear bar bird cage? What's it do if you lower? It's just going to put more angle in it, and you got to be careful. You don't want to, once again, you don't want to get over that 15 or that 45 degrees of angle, because once you get over that 45 degrees of angle, then that right rear kind of becomes a povo stick. You're going to get a lot of tire hop, and then you're going to lose traction with tire hop. So you don't want to go over that. But it'll give you more traction, and it'll give you, I should say this, it'll give you quicker traction if you lower it on the cage itself. Well, it's 8:02, so we are out of time. Great show tonight, guys. Lots of great questions. I'm glad to be back on here. I almost forgot what it was, and I was so excited tonight. I logged on the computer. I actually logged on about 5 o'clock to make sure this thing all worked, and it worked. And I'm thinking, well, this is going to be awesome. So, needless to say, but I did have my computer worked on, so they hopefully got some of the bugs fixed out of it and whatever. Anyway, thanks again, guys, and we'll see you again next week. So don't forget, next week we've got Cole Queensland as a special guest, and once again, don't forget about the Harris Clash coming up August 8th.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.